So good morning and welcome to this important discussion on preparing a future-ready clean energy workforce. As the global energy transition accelerates, building a skilled and adaptable workforce is critical to achieve our climate ambition goals. Clean energy is no longer a niche sector. I think we all agree with that, right? It is rapidly becoming the foundation of global economies, and the ability to develop, sustain, and scale a competent workforce will determine how we effectively transition to a low-carbon world. The IEA did a study and estimates that over 65 million global workforce is already in clean energy workspace. And by 2030, 13 million will join this workforce. There was also a recent study done by BCG that highlights there's a critical shortfall of 7 million green energy workers, right? With the 7 million energy workers short gap, you can see how critical it is that we need to upskill our workforce, right? We need to ensure that the green skills are integrated into a national and corporate strategies. The talent gap is driven by multiple reasons. It's insufficient policies, programs, investment in education, training, right? And bridging this gap requires collaboration across various sectors: government, academic institutions, and organizations. So with that, I'm pleased to welcome our esteemed panelists, Rashmi, Atul, Nitendra, and Suresh. So let's hear from them what is needed to close these gaps, attract new talent, and build a workforce equipped to navigate the evolving energy landscape. So one common question I have for all of you, because you all are working in this space and addressing, and all of you, when we have talked, agreed that upskilling is the need of the hour. So I think I would like to hear from all of you, and I'm sure everybody would want to hear, what is your organization doing? How do you see the skill set evolving in this particular sector now and over the next few years? So Rashmi, should we start with you?
Yeah. Very good morning to all of you. So I've been going around IEW for the last few days, and certain themes are very clearly emerging as far as clean energy is concerned. So we are talking about solar, we're talking about wind, biofuels, green hydrogen, and now more and more about nuclear. But the way I'm looking at it, these are, technical skills for which you need engineers and maybe some specialized inputs to these engineers to be able to set up maybe solar plants or biofuel plants or whatever. But other than the skills which we are less focused on, which are equally important, and I see them emerging as are commercial skills. How many of us are really looking into, green power stock exchanges? How many of us know trading on power, trading on, carbon markets? So these are also some commercial skills, as well as economies are changing around these green skills. So that gap also is to be addressed alongside the technical skills. For example, we have now something called the social stock exchange. Even the way we are conducting our own CSR programs are now going to undergo a change. So there's so much of disruption happening on technical side, on commercial side, on social side, that there's a huge skill gap, which you also pointed out. There is a skill gap. And for us, I belong to a government sector. So for us, the problem becomes even more acute because we do very nominal lateral hiring. We hire from the lowest rung and grow our own timber. So then, we have to continuously evolve our manpower, because if we don't do that, then we are stagnating. So the responsibility on HR becomes many-fold, because we have to continuously see to it that our manpower is future ready. So probably we'll hear from others, and I'll come back to how we are doing that. But that responsibility is very acute and very serious in our space, because we have to, continuously upskill our manpower.
Great, thanks, Rashmi. So Atul, you heard that besides just the technical skills, the commercial skills are also going to be important over the next few years. Do you want to add on to what Rashmi said about how important the reskilling is, and what kind of initiatives do you foresee and the different roles that are going to emerge in this space over the next few years.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, all. So when we talked about this energy and transition, and the manpower is always at the center of the stage, because ultimately the people are driving the businesses. So the country which is having a third largest energy consumer, uh, when we as an equal joint venture of Indian Oil and Adani Ports and SEZC, we have two strategic plan in place. One is on short term, which is like 3 to 5 years of plan. And then we also have an plan available which talk about 10 years of span. So I think it has to start it at the board level first. The board has to have a mindset that this is going to happen. However, I also have my own thoughts that it's a gradual and it will go step by step. We have to also realistic to the fact that we have started LPG marketing in country somewhere around 1960-65 as a professional way of marketing LPG cylinders. And couple of years back, still we were distributing the new connections and new cylinders in large part of the country. Similarly, electricity, it took 75 years to us as a country to deliver to the last mile connection. So again, when we talked about transition and transformation, it will be a phase-wise transaction, and being one of the most stable economy, a growing economy, I think it's also advisable as a part of oil and gas industry professional that let it happen in the well-planned manner itself. So when I see the skilling activities, it has to be, as we stated, the management thought process, and then we need to see really a technical skilling. So technical skilling can be a time-taking process. So for that purpose, I think the immediate plan of 3 to 5 year span, and then next stage of like decade, how the transition will happen, that will be a more value added for the industry.
Great. Thanks, Atul. You touched upon a very important point that, while you have a short-term and long-term, strategic plans, you mentioned a phrase, the board is aligned. And I think it's so important that once we have an alignment at the top, then we know that we can make these, changes and the transformations because everybody's aligned from the top. It's a very important point. And Suresh, let's hear from you. From the corporate side, you heard technical skills, commercial skills are important. And Atul touched upon the long-term and the short-term plan. And he also mentioned that, it does take time, right? People who are working in a specific domain, they have specific skill set. Training and upskilling is not the easiest, right? It takes time. So what are your views on that?
Thank you, Divya, and a very good morning to all of you. See, when we talk of clean energy, actually, we can talk about it in three buckets. The first is, one is the RE systems which are there, the renewable energy systems, like you have PV, solar, wind, green hydrogen, and so on and so forth. The second is, of course, once you generate this kind of energy, how do you take it? So you need grid systems and you need smart grids. And the third bucket is, of course, how do you store this particular energy so that, it becomes useful for you when the sun is not shining at night. So if you look at these three buckets, it requires three different sets of skills which are required. So if you look at the first thing of RE systems, you'll require engineers who are proficient with the solar, PV, things like that. In the grid, you require people who are very familiar with digital systems. You need smart grids. So people need to know, how to write those algorithms, how to make those machine learning, and all of those kind of skills are required there. And of course, grid, if you look at battery storage and things like that, you require advanced chemistry. So these are the sets of skills which are required for. So each of these buckets calls for different skill sets which are required. If you look at what the industry is doing today, I think I can be specific to the Indian oil and gas industry. And here we have been collaborating. While we compete at a different level, we have been collaborating on skills. And so all the oil industry, I think the 9 or 10 companies that we constitute, we have come together to set up institutes of national repute. So we have the Indian Institute of Petroleum and Energy at Visakhapatnam. We have the RGIPT at Raebareli. So these are institutes which are national institutes which are giving us very specific sector skills, both in clean energy as well as for fossil fuels. So that's one thing which is happening at the higher end of the value chain. Second thing is that we also have skill development institutes which are there, which are working at the lower end of the skill chain. So if you look at it, for example, our skill development institute at Visakhapatnam, so we are training solar technicians. So we have already trained about 2,500 solar technicians. We are just in talks with NTPC to create another 2,000 technicians for green hydrogen. So a lot of activities also happening in these skill development centers in building capacity and capability amongst our Indian workforce. Apart from that, at HPCL specifically, I can speak that we are training our officers not to look at this, but we are training them to become resilient, to be adaptable to change. So project management skills. So these are the new sets of skills that we want our new leadership to have, so that they must be able to adapt to change and also be able to take on change.
Great. Thank you, Suresh. Nitendra, let's hear from you. Heard everybody talk about the different skills, the people talking about engineers, digital systems, and you also heard from Suresh that they're already taken steps, right, in reskilling people. So what are your thoughts? What does industry need to do, and what do you think, if you want to be, everybody talked about high level skills, can you be a little bit more specific maybe for our audience? What kind of skills? And are we only looking at engineers, or does it go beyond engineering, right?
Thank you. Morning all. I think let's start with good news. The good news is India is one of the youngest country, and we have the youngest workforce, and we are producing almost 1 million engineers per year. So all those gaps which we are talking about in terms of number, we are good. Now comes to the skills, and I think all of the speakers have nicely mentioned the steps which are required and the upskilling which is required and steps being already taken. In terms of technical understanding, let's take a quick example what we are talking about here. If we take the oil and gas industry, we have most of the key skill or niche skills, what we say, which are really required for these upcoming new industries, including nuclear, fusion, all of it. And these skills are, let's say, welding engineers. Globally, there is a significant shortage of welding engineers. So we have, now what we need to do is to train them, to upskill them, that this sort of skill can be applied to nuclear industry per se. And there is this technical difference which is coming, for which specific trainings are required, which is where we are lagging. To give you an example, if you need to take out, let's say, some weight from a pool of water, as a mechanical engineer, you will say a stiff, heavy rod is good enough to carry off the weight and forces to pick it up. Simple concept. However, as a nuclear engineer, it will be a dying thing. You need to have a pipe zigzag to avoid the radiation environment to take care of it. Now, there is a conflict in technical terms between a mechanical engineer himself and the mechanical engineer who's taking care of the nuclear product in this sense. So, even though we are generating good amount of skilled workforce, we still need to train them for the upcoming challenges from the different fields. And that includes all those renewable energies, nuclear, fusion. This is one. One more challenge which is on a global scale we are seeking and we are following, the gender balance and the representation of youth in that sense, which we also take into account. And especially the fields which we are talking, STEM fields, you can say largely, need not to say, the women representation is very low. That is also a challenge which we need to pursue right at this beginning if we are really looking for a, let's say, developed country or a transition country, because that constitutes to 50% of the workforce. So these are 2-3 key points which I would like to pursue in whatever steps whosoever is taking for this energy transition.
Great. Thank you so much, Nitendra. Rashmi, I'm going to come back to you. And we all heard from all the panelists, that yes, reskilling is important. And I think a couple of you also touched upon the point that it's very important to actually reskill within the organization. Hiring fresh talent is not always an option, right? Because we already have shortfall. So you're not going to be able to meet your requirements just focusing on external hiring. So internal hiring is important. We also know that collaboration across sectors is important for reskilling. If you have to specifically talk about your organization, Indian Oil, what are the actual steps you guys have taken in the reskilling space?
So Divya, the way I look at the problem is, Nitendra mentioned that there are 1 million engineers this country is churning out on an annual basis. But there are statistics which say that a very small percentage of them are actually employable. So, our academia is not really aligned to applicability. And that's where the industry gap comes from, because we are churning more school book, college book engineers than practical engineers. So, and that's where the corporates come in. So the way I look at it, instead of looking at as a short-term, medium-term, or a long-term reskilling strategy, we are looking at it as a continuous process. We are looking at like a continuum, and I'll give you an example how. See, when the country was flooded with computers, none of us knew how to use. Those skills were missing. But in a matter of a couple of years, all corporates had everybody skilled to use computers where nobody even knew how to send mails. So the way Indian Oil is looking at it, we are also looking at that we now have a workforce which is going to be with us for next 3 decades, where the business is not going to be definitely what it is now. And if we have to have a mass understanding of the subject, it has to be approached as a mass issue. So we are following a multi-pronged approach where we have identified a group of people who will be actually, leading the core team for energy transition. So we are focused on that they get the entire technical know-how, commercial know-how, how to do a, tender evaluation, how to float a tender for per se, what are the different varieties of maybe PVs available for a solar efficiency or whatever. So we are doing a very dedicated course for them, which we have tied up with some IITs who have curated it specially as per our requirement, not what they were offering off the table. Then we have also, rolled out, we've tied up with university to do voluntary weekend courses for our employees, who just want to be in with the times and want to do a certification for themselves and say that, yeah, they also have green certifications and green energy. So we've tied with them, and their weekend classes, and you'll be surprised to know, like when we were rolling it out first, I felt that who would join weekend classes giving up their own time, but now we have a queue waiting that when are you rolling out the next batch, because so many people want to come up and upskill themselves voluntary, and I think voluntary always works better than forced. And then we have a third group wherein, we have offered a lot of mass online content to our employees, which has certifications, and we say that you do the certification, we'll reimburse the money to you. So those certifications are available to them as a bouquet, and they can just pick on and do it on their own. So we are approaching it in a very, very, democratized fashion, where focus is on a few key people, but we are opening it up to the masses, so that tomorrow when my business is transitioning from oil and gas to, green energy, I say that I have a workforce which understands what this is all about, and most of my people know which space they are working in. So that's how we are approaching this issue.
Great. It's really good to hear that actually people are volunteering for the weekend programs, because a lot of times the biggest thing we feel, and I focus on reskilling space at BCG, so one of the challenges we always hear from the organizations is that people have their regular jobs, so they don't have time to work. Even when we're running the programs, people always have a conflict with their day job and their reskilling. So it's really good to hear that people actually are realizing that they need to upskill themselves.
It also shows that the workforce wants to stay relevant.
Absolutely.
And we are providing them ways and means to stay relevant.
Yes, that's very, very important, and I think it's closer to what I do, so it's really good to hear that point from you. Thanks, Rashmi. Atul, we talk about, how we have, everybody's agreeing that we have to upskill people, right? We have heard from Rashmi what are the steps being taken by Indian Oil on upskilling. It's not, but every transition comes with its challenges, right? While every organization realizes upskilling is important and we have to have a cross-sector approach in upskilling, what do you see are the challenges associated with such a change in an energy industry?
Yeah, of course, when any industry has to go for such an transformative change, there will be challenges. And the first thing I think is the mindset. So that's why in the earlier communication I mentioned, it has to again a top-down approach. If the board and then the management team is having an clarity in terms of how do you want it to really navigate this change, uh, I think it resolves most of the issues, at least at the strategy level. But when we talked about day-to-day operations management and the technicalities, we need to agree that yes, there is an huge differentiation which we can see in the coming years. Say for example, we are habitual of handling petroleum product or maximum say LPG to a 6 to 7 bar or something like that, and tomorrow same setup of people have to handle hydrogen or compressed natural gas and some other product which is quite an very high pressure in terms of process safety, in terms of technicalities, in terms of basically how to manage this very effectively, is there is a sizable difference. So we need to have, I think, plan in place, and then the inclusion from the employees side as well, that this is going to happen. So maybe, as Rashmi has mentioned, that the generations today, they are more keen in terms of their larger engagement, their learning skills are quite high. So we need to use them effectively. And we need to also believe that our Indian engineering or technical syllabus is quite comprehensive. Our people are highly multi-skilled people, and the next generation is having a very close eye towards ESG initiatives. They talked and really love the sustainability initiatives. If you really convince them through this induction process, through this periodical interaction process, I think the resistance level up to large extent we can have this as a positive engagement from the generation G, at least I can see. However, certain technical challenges will be always there. For that purpose, the engineering setup in the country has to really geared up. So today we have a very traditional way of R&Ds, etc. So that also need to be have a very open thinking. I have an own views that whatever amount of efforts Government of India put with own government's mechanism, it will not really be effective till the time you add private sector in it. So this is the time in terms of the new energies as well, the private sector has to be equally involved so that we really build a commercial and scalable type of model. Just last one point that R&D, the companies, those have really geared up in current scenario, they will be able to make it very smoothly down the line 1 decade or so. So whatever the amount of efforts we need to put it in R&D today, that is really going to help for the methodical changes, I can say.
So Atul, if I have to summarize the key points you called out, you mentioned that the collaboration between the private sector and the government is very crucial, right? I don't think any of us disagree with that point. And also the traditional thinking that we have currently in R&D space, that also has to change. I'm going to go back to your first point. You talk about mindset and planning and inclusion, right? When you're talking of mindset, are you seeing that mindset shift even at the top level, right? All the CEOs, you talk to any big organization, everybody talks about upskilling and reskilling, right? With all the technologies that are coming in, and especially in the clean energy, it's there in their mind. But is that really there? It's there in their mind, but is that a priority for them?
See, in the current scenario, I think there is scope in terms of a larger engagement, I can say. Still, we are occupied what is happening in and around us, and then maybe even the senior team is not really in position to think beyond a year or so. So that's why it's important that leadership has to drive it. So it is going to be a real transformation for us as an industry, as an individual, as well as a country. So I think the acceptance and then our preparedness for that only going to help us in terms of positive approach towards this thing.
Great. Thank you so much, Atul. Suresh, coming back to you, how can the organizations actually leverage these new technologies? You're talking about virtual reality, AI. Everybody's talking. Like AI has actually gone now. It's more Gen AI, right? So with all these new technologies and digital platforms, how do you accelerate the development of highly skilled energy workforce today?
Thank you, Divya. I think, see, to answer your question, today is an era of hyper personalization. So people want content at their time, at their place, and at their convenience. So for us at HR, I think the challenge is to deliver that. To have this kind of digital platforms which are enabled, which can deliver content which is relevant for them, and which they're looking for. And also these, like today you have the online marketplaces. So when you go and search for a particular product, it also gives suggestions based on your search as to what other people who have searched for this has also purchased. So similarly in our CBMS learning systems and things like that, we will have to have those nudges of people, when you're looking for a certain information, probably you can also learn of these things. I will give you some two use cases in AI in which we use at HPCL. The first use case is how we have used AI is in the maintenance manuals at our refinery. So here we have hundreds of equipment which have come from original equipment manufacturers, OEMs. And so each of those OEM, those machines have their own manuals and things like that, which run into thousands of pages. It was a big challenge for us, how do we bring out this information and teach it to the young engineers who are joining us. So today we have actually fed those bits of information into the AI. And so today all those manuals which have been there have been actually, we have put it on a GPT platform. And today for a young engineer, if he's looking for any information even pertaining to a nut or bolt of a particular unit, he only needs to query on that particular system, and then he gets the information in a curated content is coming to him. Second is, so today he doesn't have to pore over thousands of manuals, search for those manuals. So he doesn't have to rely on these things, but he's using AI actually as an enabling tool to actually find the information he's looking at in a matter of seconds. Second is we have also used this for HR. And the challenge is we put all our entire HR personal manual. And today we have found that 90% of the time, even a complex question which is put, which maybe some of my first line new HR officers would find it difficult to answer. But the HR GPT platform that we have built is able to answer it about 90% of the time right. And we have gone back and seen the system, and we have found that the 10% of the time when it's not getting, the system is not getting it right, it was maybe because of the HR jargon that we had thrown into those policies. So we are actually going back and changing those policies and the wording that we've used there. So there are a lot of interesting use cases, like similarly if you use virtual reality in our Management Development Institute. So we have a virtual walking tour through the entire refinery, all the units of our refineries. So our young engineers who are joining the organization without actually putting them under the, actually sending them into an unsafe environment in the very first instance. We take them through a virtual tour of the entire refineries where he can actually, like using a metaverse, he can actually look at all the equipment, look at all the pipe tracks and all the units and understand what he's going to be. And this is exactly the same thing when he's going to go to the unit. So this is a 3D film that is there. So a lot of these technologies, be it augmented reality, mixed reality, these are all going to be cutting edge tools in the days to come for us to make this transition both from fossil fuels to clean tech, or to get these new technologies. I'm sure that these things will only accelerate the pace of development for us.
No, I think very valid points, because Suresh, you talked about how you're using the AI now and creating a curated learning, right? So it's not like a set learning program for everybody. People can focus on where the skill gaps are, consume the content quicker, more efficiently, and and retainment. The retainment is much higher because you have this bite-sized learning now.
Yes.
So you're not consuming multiple pages of manuals and everything. So very, very relevant points. Nitendra, I'm going to come to you now. If you look at the recent union budget, right, it outlines a significant push towards nuclear energy as part of India's long-term energy transition right? The government also has set an ambitious target of 100 gigawatt nuclear power capacity by 2047. There are also a bunch of initiatives that have been laid out as part of the budget in this area. From your viewpoint, I'm again going to focus on like now why we have talked about all these different initiatives. Government is really pushing for it, but there are going to be again challenges to get that, right? To get to that ambitious target that we have. If you have to pick the two most important challenges, what would they be?
You have rightly mentioned the target is really ambitious. And if you see in past, let's say 70 years, we have reached to, let's say 20-ish gigawatt right now from nuclear. And we have like almost 80 more. Two main, which I think all of the panelists will agree is one for the new workforce and one for the existing transition workforce. So when we say new workforce, the education system need to be updated. I'll give you an example. Let's say 15 years back, there were several universities in India who started the bachelor's and master's courses in nuclear engineering. They continued for, let's say, 6 to 8 years, and then they all shut down because industry was not ready to take this up. This was one. Second point, what Rashmi has rightly mentioned, as per industry, the workforce was not really ready to be taken up. Now, right now, if you see from this perspective, all these announcements, industry is ready, but we don't have the courses anymore. So this is for the new workforce perspective, and it will be a challenge. And for this, we require to have not only the collaboration, what Atul was mentioning, the collaboration between private and public, but also with the academia into this triangle. Second point for the transition workforce. As I mentioned, it is going to be a very niche area where a specific type of training is required. And in some cases, it will not be it will not be complete to do online trainings. You will require some sort of hands-on training, and that will require specific tools. For example, if you want to do, now the government is thinking of including private to operate all those nuclear reactors as well. So let's say operation will require a sort of hands-on training on reactor program. You cannot ask the training directly to the power plant. You will require some sort of training with research reactors and that sort of training platform, which is not currently available in the public domain. So we need to have, let's say, research reactors, small reactors for training purposes specifically in the public domain, let's say with academia or a training center dedicatedly including this triangle of public, private and academic formation, things like that. So they will be two key challenges which we need to address right now if we really want to achieve the goal by 2047.
Great.
Which is itself a challenge.
Great. Thank you to all the panelists. I think I just want to call out, I think what we all heard was that skilling is definitely an important part. If we have to address the shortfall of the workforce that can actually be employed in the clean energy area, there is a need for collaboration across multiple sectors. And then we also need to realize that the current workforce also needs to realize that they need to stay relevant. So while the organizations are making efforts in upskilling, but I think the self-awareness also needs to be there that people need to stay relevant and they need to upskill. So thank you everyone, and thank you panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you.